All right, I got 5 o'clock. Is the camera ready? All right, we're ready.
How you doing tonight?
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and call the City Council Workshop to order for Tuesday, November 7, 2017. Let the record state that the entire council, except for Mr. Johnson, and maybe he'll show up here in a little bit, is present. He's out of town? It's all right, so the entire council, with the exception of Mr. Johnson, is here. And first thing on the agenda is DS 17-107, discuss agenda items for regular city council meeting for November 14, 2017. First thing on that is the minutes, MN 17-026. Any questions on that? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to public hearings. We're going to have public hearings PH 17-047A. Consider memorandum resolution approving a professional service agreement with Garver LLC for the design bidding service and construction phase service for the passenger boarding bridge improvement at the Killeen Fort Hood Regional Airport. Mr. Van Valkenburg, welcome.
Thank you, sir, Mr. Mayor, Council, City Manager, and City Attorney. Killeen Fort Hood Regional Airport was opened for service in 2004. We opened with 4 operational gates manufactured by Dew Bridge Incorporated. Dew has since gone out of business, and these bridges have experienced significant wear and tear to the point that we're manufacturing our own parts or ordering from out of country to keep these bridges operational. Hence, in 2016, the airport conducted a preliminary engineering review which recommended replacement of those 4 boarding bridges. The final design to this project will provide not only the architectural design, but it will provide all the engineering necessary for the replacement project. The total cost will be $599,400. It's fully funded by Federal Aviation Airport Improvement Program grant and the 10% passenger facility charge match. And the program will include not only the design, but the bidding services, construction management, and the full project management to project completion. This is only part of the total project for the bridge replacement. The project itself will be approximately $6 million. We expect design should be complete in April of 2018, bid in the May-June timeframe of that same year, and grant award in August to September of 2018, with construction starting in approximately November of 2018. We did consider a few alternatives. One was to use the AIP and PFC grant, as mentioned, to complete the project. The other was don't do the project and continue on our current path. We do recommend alternative 1. It's fully funded. There are no operational funds or financial impact to the airport. And importantly, it was fully supported by our airline partners as well. Therefore, our recommendation to you will be that the City Council authorize the City Manager to execute the professional service agreement with Garver for the project, and also have the authority to execute any and all change orders, supplement agreement with the amount set by state or local law. I'll answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Van Valkenburg? All right, none. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
PH 17-047B, hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance amending the FY 2018 annual budget and plan of municipal service of the City of Killeen by increasing the AIP grant revenue account and increasing the various aviation department expenditures account. Miranda Drake, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The purpose of the budget amendment is to appropriate the Airport Improvement Program match of 90% for the passenger boarding bridges capital improvement project, and to appropriate the passenger facility charge match of 10%. This budget amendment also appropriates multiple passenger and customer facility charge capital improvement projects. The fiscal impact is appropriating both the 10% grant match and 100% of the approved projects for the passenger facility charge and 100% of the approved projects for the customer facility charge. Fund balance from the passenger and customer facility charges will pay for the remaining fund balance, and there is no impact to the Killeen Fort Hood Regional Airport Operating Fund. This next table shows the appropriations of $540,000 for the Airport Improvement Program grant revenue, $1,331,000 for the passenger facility charge capital improvement project expense, and $1.6 million for the customer facility charge capital improvement project expense. In the following slide, this slide shows a breakdown of the use of fund balance for each. The passenger facility charge, the estimated beginning fund balance is $1,066,211, plus the current year budgeted revenue of $673,000, less the proposed passenger facility charge capital improvement projects of $1,331,000, leaving an estimated fund balance of $408,211. For the customer facility charge, the estimated beginning fund balance is $1,941,511, plus the current year budgeted revenue of $272,423, less the proposed customer facility charge capital improvement projects of $1.6 million, which leaves a remaining fund balance of $613,934. And I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Mrs. Drake? Looks like none. You did a good job. Thank you. All right, next is PH 17-048A. Consider an ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of general obligation refund bonds. Mrs. Evans, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. The city currently has the opportunity to save over $2.2 million in interest by refunding $30,295,000 of existing debt. Similar to refinancing a home mortgage, the new bonds that will be issued to pay off the old bonds will have a lower interest rate without increasing the principal outstanding or the term of the bonds. At this time, there are 5 bond issuances totaling $30,295,000 with interest rates ranging from 3.1% to 5% that will be refunded. As you can see on this slide, the total projected debt service savings is $2.2 million, which equates to a net present value savings of $1.7 million or 5.56%. Texas law provides 2 options for bond refundings. The first is for City Council to adopt an ordinance with final pricing terms, and the second is to adopt a delegation ordinance allowing final pricing terms to be set by a city official within set parameters. The second option allows the city to designate the city manager or the mayor to set the pricing date based on favorable market conditions. The delegation parameters set the maximum principal amount to be refunded at $40,115,000, which exceeds the $30,295,000 of bonds currently identified. This is to allow for additional refundings if market conditions improve. To be eligible for refunding, the maximum maturity date will be no later than August 1st, 2036, and the net present value savings must exceed 5%. The next steps in this is to apply to Standard & Poor's for bond ratings. City Council will consider the delegation ordinance at the next meeting. A rating conference call or meeting will be set. The preliminary official statement will be issued. We will receive our rating. At that time, the refunding bonds will be priced and awarded, and we're anticipating on December 21st that the funds will be delivered to the escrow agent. Staff recommends City Council approve the ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of general obligation refunding bonds. We have our financial advisor, Dan Wegmiller, and our bond counsel, Bart Fowler, here, and either they or I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I just have one. Our bond rating hasn't changed, right? We still have what is it, a double A?
It's a double A.
Double A. And so something like this, would maybe a chance of maybe improving that?
I think later, when we actually discuss the financial policies, and once those are adopted, those will be of great benefit to the city and will help us with our bond rating. Right now, this is really just a refunding. It's not going to be a real in-depth call, I would not expect. I really don't foresee any change.
So the reason that we're getting these better rates really has to do more with the market than with the double A rating that we have?
Yes, sir.
That's kind of where I was hitting at, so thank you. Any questions? Mr. Kilpatrick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Directed to the city manager. Is it possible we could get this presentation, because it wasn't provided in our packet?
Yes, sir.
Prior to the next day or so we could have a chance to review?
We'll get it out to you tomorrow.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mrs. King, did you have a question? Did you raise your hand?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, Mr. Okry. I thought I saw another hand here. Anybody else got any questions? All right, good job, Ms. Evans. Thank you. All right, moving on. PH 17-048B, hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance amending the FY 2018 annual plan of budget and plan of municipal service of the city of Killeen by increasing the revenue and expenditure accounts for the issuance of general obligation refund bonds. Mrs. Evans, kind of same thing here.
Yes, sir. This budget amendment is required for the previous item to refund up to $40,115,000 of outstanding bonds. As stated previously, the city is estimating over $2.2 million of interest savings over the life of the bonds, which equates to a 5.56% net present value savings. This amendment will increase the bond proceeds revenue account in the debt service fund by $40,115,000, which will be offset by an increase to the payment to escrow expenditure account of $39,640,000 and the issuance cost expenditure account by $475,000. Staff recommends City Council approve amending the budget by increasing both the revenue and expenditure accounts of the debt service funds for the issuance of general obligation refunding bonds. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions? None? Easy. All right. PH 17-049, hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance requested by V Bar Properties, LP, case number Z17-24, to rezone approximately 1.855 acres out of the WH Cole Survey Abstract Number 200 from B3 Local Business District to R2 Two-Family Residential District. The property is located on the east and west side, west right-of-way of Taylor Renee Drive, North Chaparral Road in Killeen, Texas. Mr. McElwain, welcome.
Thank you. I thought it was my theme song for a second walking up here, but I'll pretend it was anyway.
I told somebody to call me right when you walk up.
Okay, I can appreciate that. So this item, as the mayor mentioned, does involve the rezone request that we initially got for duplex development. The area in blue is the 1.855 acres in question. It's currently all zoned B3 Local Business District. For the sake of bringing you all the parcels in one zoning request, we included the right-of-way for this request. If you're familiar with the site, it is located east and west of Taylor Renee Drive, north of Chaparral Road. This is the zoning map. The area south of Chaparral is in the county, so it has no zoning designation, but you see that we've got B3 zoning along this corridor, some agricultural single family, and then we've got suburban residential zoning for Cosper Ridge Estates. And all of this area in red is designated as general residential in the city's future land use map. We notified 7 surrounding property owners for this rezone request. However, we received a petition from 67 individuals in opposition to the R2 zoning. We received this request at the Planning and Zoning Commission workshop. In our brief discussions with some of those individuals present, they noted that they were fine with the commercial zoning as is. They would be okay with single-family residential zoning, but they were not in support of duplexes to finish out their neighborhood. When presented this information, the property owner, V-Bar Properties, who was Mr. Cosper, Mr. G. Wayne Cosper was in attendance at that meeting, agreed to change his request from R2 to R1, and that was fine with those individuals in attendance at the meeting. So you have a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission of R1. Despite all of the people that were opposed to the request, it does not amount to a supermajority vote because only 3 of those people were within a 200-foot notification boundary, and a number of them were not the property owners. We assumed they were renters. So for your item next week, As it stands today, the property owner, the residents, the council, the commission, and the staff are all fine with the R1 request, and we haven't received any issue or concerns from the residents about single families development finishing out that neighborhood. So I'd like to answer the questions you all have.
Can we, is that something we can change here at the workshop, or do we have to just move it forward next week as an R2 and change it up there?
Yes, sir. Please keep it moving forward. Just, we noticed it that way in the newspaper, and people are sometimes prone to change their minds. So at the time that the motion is made, if everyone is still in agreement with that, it's when you consider it then. It's a more restrictive zoning district, so it would be fine.
So just leave it like it is. All right, any questions? All right, you're done. All right, moving back to our discussion items, DS 17-108, discuss regulation of TNCs and amending the taxi and ground transportation ordinances. Mrs. Briggs, welcome.
All right, tonight I have the transportation ordinance back before you. Of course, this is where we regulate taxi cabs, limousines, and shuttles, things like that. And this discussion started almost a year ago, I think, maybe a little bit longer. Originally, the request you had was to try to do something because of Uber. I think some of the cab companies had brought that to you. Just to remind you, some of our previous discussions, the local government code does provide that a municipality, in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare, shall license, control, or otherwise regulate private taxi cab services. And then the types of things that it says we can regulate are entry into the business, rates, safety and insurance requirements, and any other things that we feel are necessary to ensure safe and reliable transportation for the citizens. The last meeting earlier this summer was, the guidance I received from y'all was to minimize the regulations. It was a very lengthy ordinance. There were a lot of things in there that clearly you all didn't appreciate or like, and some of the things we weren't enforcing very well. Eliminate the vehicle inspections and to make it enforceable. So before you, I have what went from, depending on how you printed it, it was anywhere from 43 to 51 pages long. The draft you have in front of you is about 6.5 pages long. I took out anything I could possibly take out that either we weren't enforcing, we didn't have to enforce, or things that maybe were duplicative. And I try to combine them all so that all of the transportation services are regulated the same. So the main things that have changed are on this chart here. Currently, if you recall, we regulate taxis by a franchise and all other transportations by an operating authority. The taxi franchise is 5 years, other things are 3 years, but that is actually a procedural difference in a big way. A franchise requires 3 readings of the city council, which takes about 2 months. They have to be a specific time apart by ordinance. And then there's also a 60-day waiting period. So it takes about 4 months to get a franchise for a taxi. Operating authority just takes 1 reading of the city council. So what I've proposed in the draft you have is that all transportation services would have an operating authority. Originally, I had proposed 3 years. It is 5 in the draft you have now. We had a meeting last week with the stakeholders, and there were some council members who had asked at the last meeting to be involved in that. And the discussion with the people that were there was that they thought 5 years was better. So your draft now has 5 years. And that's in sections 29.5 and 29-7. Currently, our ordinance requires that the taxi cabs have a vehicle inspection. This is that thing that happens every December. They go out to the fleet warehouse. There's an inspection of if they have dents in their vehicles, tears in their upholstery, if they have the fire extinguisher, all the different safety things that are involved. They're all spelled out in our ordinance. That was obviously something that a consensus of you told me you did not want, so it's taken out of there. The requirement now in section 29-9 is that all of those vehicles have a current state inspection and registration, which is still just like your car, just that one sticker that shows they have both of those. There was some concern that if they come in December and show that they have a current sticker, but it expires next month, they could be expired just driving around. It's the same situation with the inspection we do now. If you bring the cabs in once a year in December and everything looks fine, everything could be wrong the next month too. The good thing about that, though, as far as enforcement is, state inspection and registration is something that the police department enforces on all vehicles. They don't typically pull cabs over just to make sure that all their hubcaps match or that they all have blue stripes. So this is actually something that's probably a little more enforceable. I'm going to hit on this one pretty quickly about the driving history and the criminal history. We had criteria in our current ordinance. What I had proposed is to match the TNCs. This was a big discussion at our stakeholder meeting. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it on the next slide, so kind of bear with me. I'll skip that one. And then a pretty minor issue, but the permits that we require the vehicles to have, currently our ordinance requires them to be in the left rear window. And that was a problem for the drivers. They were saying that, people sit in the back seat and just kind of play with them or try to tear them off. And so we've moved the permit that we required to put it in the passenger side windshield, which was at the request of the cab companies. So we had a stakeholders meeting last week. We invited all of the people that are currently holding operating authorities, which is one shuttle company, one limousine company. We have 3 taxi cab companies. Council members Johnson, Flemming, and Ms. Nash King were all there. Cove and Luxury Cab were there, and then Express Cab just emailed me some comments in. The main things that came up for discussion, as I said, the first one was the criminal and driving history. What I put in the ordinance that you have before you was the exact standards that are in state law for TNC drivers. What I took from you last time was to try to put them on equal playing ground, that anywhere that I could make it the same for cabs and TNCs, I should. So what I did was I went to the state law, which was HB 100, that applies to TNCs, and took the criminal requirements out of that. That the companies are required to run on their employees. It turns out that those are not quite the same as what we have now, and the committee the group that was there, not really committee, had asked me to show a comparison. So I have a chart that I did not get into these slides. I apologize. And I should say that the gentleman from Cove Cab is the only one I recognize from the meeting we had, and he is here. So at the top, I show the criminal history requirements, and currently in our ordinance, it says that we can deny someone if they're convicted of a criminal offense where the police department determines the offense is directly related to the ability, capability, or fitness to perform the duties of a vehicle for hire using criteria in the state law and the occupations code. And then there are some very specific things I pasted there about it has to be directly related to the offense. If it's not directly, to the job they're applying for, if it's not directly related, then it can't have been more than 5 years. There are some very specific offenses, solicitation, criminal solicitation, murder, aggravated kidnapping, sexual assault types of violations. They don't count Class C misdemeanors. And then, of course, you can't be a sex offender. The kind of vague part of all of that is that it comes down to the police department to decide, is an offense directly related? So our ordinance is extremely vague. It doesn't say you can't be convicted of armed robbery. It just says this thing, and then the police department makes the interpretation. That makes sense? So we refer to state law. What is proposed, and again, this is what is the state law for TNC drivers, is no convictions for the last 7 years for DWI, using a motor vehicle to commit a felony involving property damage, fraud, theft, an act of violence, an act of terrorism, and again, you can't be convicted of can't be a registered sex offender. So on the chart, when you see it, it's a little easier to understand under the state law. The discussion, and I'll leave it to those council members if they want to raise the discussion, but it was 7 years appropriate. Then with the driving record, at the bottom of that chart, to the left is the current regulation. You can't have 4 or more moving violations in the previous 12 months. And if you have one or more in the last 3 years, you have to show completion of a driver's safety course. What is proposed is, again, out of state law for TNCs. You cannot have been convicted in a 3-year period of more than 3 moving violations, fleeing a police officer, attempting to elude a police officer, reckless driving, or driving without a valid driver's license. So just to kind of put this back into perspective, what's on the left is what we have. What's on the right applies to TNCs. What you all want could be somewhere in the middle. It could be one or the other. But I just wanted to give you that visual of what the differences are. And they're in section 29-12 of the draft you have. The other item that we talked quite a bit about was the fees that are charged by the city, and are they accurate? And are they an accurate reflection of what we actually, what it costs us to process these? And so I asked the departments that handle that. The police department handles the driver's permits, which costs $25, and it is right about at $25 once you include the fact that they have to do fingerprints, which we normally charge citizens for. We don't charge them for transportation drivers. There's a background check. There's the cost of the reviewing the background check, and then also obviously the cost of the card itself. And altogether, the amount of time that takes, and their estimate was just over $25 of what it costs us to actually do that process. The other processes are all in the city secretary's office. She's the one who handles the applications for either a franchise or an operating authority, and then she handles the vehicle permits. So her hard costs were printing, postage, and costs of the stickers themselves. We had a hard time figuring out what the cost of stickers will be because we ordered so many of them when we did this ordinance about 18 years ago that we still have some left. So some of these are truly estimated costs. We don't need any right at the moment. Her staff time involved is to review and receive the application, verify any information that's in there, including insurance information, make sure it's accurate and valid. She has to prepare the documents that come to you for review, and then obviously all of her time in that, depositing any fees, and then with vehicles, she has to verify the vehicle information. All of that takes her somewhere between 4 and 5 hours, depending how much follow-up she's required to do, and how lengthy the process is. So the fee for it that's in the ordinance right now is $300 for a franchise, and then the vehicle permit is $50. So those are, her fees probably are not quite as high. Her time is probably not quite around $300 with her rate factored in. The one thing we did not talk about was fares at this committee meeting. And in fact, the gentleman from Cove is the person who made the best point. If it's an issue of being competitive with the TNCs, our fares are a maximum. They can charge less if they want to. So there wasn't much discussion. They're not unhappy with the fees, and so the fees that are in our current ordinance are in the ordinance that I proposed. The last issue that came up at the discussion was enforcement of, okay, if we do this, is this something we actually can enforce? I can tell you that when we originally passed this ordinance, and a couple different times in the past since I've been here, we did a big education push with the police department. This is what our ordinance says. This is the kind of things you should be looking for. These are the types of permits they're supposed to have. We haven't done that in a while. We have a lot of new officers, and it's probably something that our office can coordinate with the police department just to remind them, you know, these are the companies who are permitted to do business in our city. These are not. So those are some things we can do. But as a whole, I would say that this now condensed ordinance is a lot more enforceable than the previous one, or the current one, I should say. So just to hit on the one other part that you wanted me to address, but I have not yet. TNCs with HB 100, the only thing we can regulate is at our airport. And so TDLR is the state agency that is over the regulation of TNCs at the state level, and they had been conducting various hearings and trying to figure out what their rules were going to say. And we knew all along that the rules were going to say something about airports. They just, on October 20th, adopted the rules, which will become effective on December 1st. And what they'll allow us to do is collect a reasonable fee, request an auditable report, or enter into a mutual data sharing agreement with one of the TNCs. Matt has been very involved, Mr. Van Valkenburg, with one of his groups that he's part of in sitting in hearings and trying to understand, but the drive has been by bigger airports. And so the bigger airports plan to do something that's geofencing so that when a TNC drives in, they know it, they charge them, and they know there's a fee. That's expensive, and we don't have that many vehicles to recover that cost. So that's a big thing that will be happening in Houston and Dallas and Austin and areas like that. But the cost is probably something we can't look at right now, just considering the number of trips we would have. So right now, we're not prepared to bring something forward that fits our airport. There has to be some kind of cost recovery. We need to address the issue of TNCs at the airport. But just with those recent rules adopted, we're not quite sure. And Matt, if you have anything to add to that, I would let you.
Yes, if I could, we've reached out to several airports in our size, 9 of them. We've received responses from 4. We'll correlate when we get some responses from the other airports, then bring back to the panel that we originally met with a reasonable expectation of what we feel would be a good cost recovery form for our airport. And once that panel reviews it, then we'd like to bring that back to the full council for them.
Thank you. And we did at the committee, I keep saying committee, but at the stakeholders meeting, I did make that very clear to the group that was there that I think it is your intent to regulate them. And we absolutely will bring something back once we know what fits best for our airport. But what's being discussed at the airport level probably just isn't the best for our airport right now. So at this time, I think you've got 3 options. We can leave our current ordinance in place. We can bring back the draft ordinance that you have before you to present, to go into effect at either at any certain time. Or if you've got specific direction for me, I can make any changes that you have. And that's all I have prepared.
All right. Anybody have any recommendations here, especially you guys that were on that committee there? Mr. Okry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In section 2920, it talks about the fees, the application fee and the vehicle permit fee. Are these two fees applicable to the TCNs?
No.
So I don't think that they need to pay these all either.
Okay, well, state law says that we can't charge a fee to TNCs unless they come to our airport, and we can't charge a per vehicle fee unless they come to our airport. And that's that last slide that I was talking
No.
about. We're not ready to do that. But we, by law, cannot regulate them, so I can't write it in for them.
What we're regulating is the taxi cabs, and they are paying $300 and $350 in fees. And I'm looking at this section 2920.
Yes, sir. Those fees wouldn't just be for taxi cabs, they'd be for all of the transportation services. And the reason we have a fee proposed is to recover the cost of processing those. Those costs are absolutely up for discussion, but in my opinion, we're providing that regulation, then we can recover a cost for that. But if you want to talk about the fees or not having fees at all, that's certainly your prerogative.
All right. Anybody else? Mr. Kilpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Follow on with Councilman Okers. I'd like to know what the impact would be if we didn't charge any fees on the current budget. Is that a minuscule that we would, because we have a balanced budget. So if we adopted a new ordinance that said no fees, then what impact would it have? And would we have to find something else to balance that out? But I also see the merit that we still haven't leveled that playing field. We're still having the local taxi providers to pay a fee, which the TNCs don't have to.
I should say, the TNCs do have to pay a fee to the state. It's $10,500 a year, and it's $7,500 each year after the initial year. That does not come to us, and I understand that's not a fee that levels it out, but there is a fee for them to be a TNC. That's part of the rules that go into effect December 1st.
I think we'd like to have a little bit of more information toward that.
And I don't have the answer to your question at hand. We'd have to get it and report back to you.
When we look at some of the other cities, are they just completely eliminating those fees? Because I think I read like Houston, I know when I travel, they got them all over the airports and stuff like that, but I know like Houston, I don't think they have any fees if you drive into the airport for them, do they?
For their cabs or for TNC?
For TNCs?
Matt, do you remember Houston?
That's not correct. Austin, Houston, Dallas, they all have fees. What they're trying to do and what we got through the association with, what we worked with the association was in the implementation of House Bill 100 so that we would be inclusive to be able to collect reasonable fees for cost recovery of systems and things you perform at the airport. The things you perform are security, things you perform are road maintenance, because there's a lot of road trips every day by the TNCs and things like this. And these airports are putting together detailed plans that show all these various breakdowns in costs. They're going to build that back into their proposed fee structure with the TNCs. So I guess they're negotiating. Lately, the one that's been more but agreements have been signed with Lyft and some of the other names. I know in Austin, they've signed an agreement with 6 different TNCs. The only one holding out is Uber. But they have a signed agreement with Lyft and all the others. Uber was the one.
But that means they're going to be able to go into airports, right? And, or are they paying, you say they're paying the fees to be able to get on the airports?
Yes, sir, per trip, it's per trip. And what they do, they charge for either picking up or dropping off. So if you enter the airport and with some of these geofence systems that they have a tracking mechanism every time a vehicle enters, and then the charge goes back out to the respective TNC to pay for those trips.
And I don't think that the fee shows differently to the customer, though, either. So you may not see it, but they are probably charging it.
I know that there have been some talk about whether or not they add that fee to the customer, but that's an Uber with question, how they charge.
Yeah, no, it's because I was just reading some, and it says TNC license no longer required, especially in the Houston area. And so I said, maybe I'm reading it wrong or something, but in the Houston.
So, yes, that's with HB 100. It used to be that in each city that had regulations, you had to have a license to operate there or a permit, whatever the regulatory function was. We never got around to doing that because the state law did it. So all of those city ordinances are basically ineffective anymore. You just now have to comply with the state law. So that's that $10,000 fee they pay to TDLR. There are no driver permits. I take that back. I'm not completely sure there are no driver permits. I don't think there are. But they don't have to comply with any city requirements other than if you have an airport or a cruise ship dock. So Galveston or Houston.
All right, Mr. Kilpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Looking at the options, as I see it, and correct me if I'm wrong, the only time-sensitive nature we have is for staff to bring back the ordinance for approval, is if we do nothing by December, by our current ordinance, we're going to have inspections, and we hold the same thing as it is right now.
Yes, our
And the
current.
cabs and the TNCs are not impacted whatsoever. But if we wanted to, in essence, lower fees, instead of 300, it may be 125 to recoup our cost of the city secretary's time.
Yes, sir.
Whatever, and you said that wasn't a finite amount right now. So we would need to take some type of action prior to that that December impact where their license are going to expire.
The franchises don't expire at the end of December. They expire 5 years from the time the ordinance was passed. So those wouldn't, the vehicle inspections normally do take place in December, so we would have to schedule those, if this doesn't pass before the end of the year. The driver permits could be expiring vehicle permits. I know one of the shuttles, they have an operating authority that is expiring at the end of the year. So but those things can be renewed either way. But yes, we would have to schedule the inspections.
So do we need to go back and just have the committee make a recommendation or something?
Mr. Mayor, I'd make that recommendation, the committee come back to us.
Make a recommendation to
Very
the council?
timely
Because I think from what I'm in, most of the council, it's kind of flexible to whatever the recommendation is that comes out of the committee or the staff or whatever. So I know the staff pretty much relies on the council, and the council's going to have to rely on that committee. So, Mr. Rivera?
I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, but I just got a question. I'm pertaining to some of this safety and some of this things that may involve the police department. Has anyone contact the police department and get some advice on how to tweak this ordinance also as well, like the inspection, felony and so forth? Did they have any type of background, any type of information that also could be helpful to implement?
I got the cost background for what it costs the police department to do the permits.
I want some background, what the police department may have that may help in the process of this ordinance as well.
Just so I'm clear, because it sounds like you're giving.
I'll give you an example, inspection. On inspection of those vehicles, you say the regular inspection are much better than the old one. Has anybody asked the police department which inspection is better for them to implement?
The police department didn't do the inspection in the past.
I understand that, but they go through the drill every time something's wrong with any type of violation. I believe it goes to the police department, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm not sure I understand.
If anyone gets a violation in the street,
To talk about enforcement, if somebody,
yeah, that's right, that's what I'm talking about.
Enforcement.
It's about enforcement things and so forth. Is there a specific rule or regulation that may help to decide which best way to go? Instead of 3 violation and 3 moving violation, instead of 4 violation, sometimes they may have good information that could help us on this issue with the past history.
Yes, and I will take the brunt of that one. I did not do that. Like I said earlier, I felt like your direction was to try to make them even wherever I could. And so since the state wrote a regulation for TNCs, it seemed easiest just to, well, there's theirs. Let's see what they want. But I did not contact anyone at the police department to find out what they think would be appropriate regulations for.
I sure wish somebody do contact them and get their input as well. And my other question would be, just like Mr. Kilpatrick said, what would be the impact of not having those fees? I understand that if they don't need it, they don't need it. But if there's an impact on manpower that we have to eat up the fees, I don't want to do that. I want to find out what's the impact that they have if we take those fees out. Those are the only 2 things that I'm concerned.
Well, I can tell you that, as I said earlier, there are 3 cab
Understand.
companies. So it's not like we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. I can tell you that. All of these fees, if you multiplied all of them times, and none of them have 50 cars either.
Oh, well.
And none of them have 50 drivers. So those numbers are
I do have the
relatively small.
number.
I'm
We
sorry.
do have the number. It's $3,325.
3,025.
325.
so not a lot. Did you finish?
I'm done.
Mrs. King?
Mr. Mayor, when the committee meets, am I to understand that you want to focus on either no fees, lowering the fees, or recoup the fees that the employees put in to do the paperwork? What is our intent when we meet again?
I think you just said it right there. Do we want to look at all aspects and then just make a recommendation? I know, are these proposals here, these are the things that you guys came up with initially?
During the meeting, everybody, and Ms. Clemens, correct me if I'm wrong, the cab company, the stakeholders, they were okay with this ordinance that we was bringing before the council to make decisions. And we spent a lot of time, you came in late working on this, and they're okay with it.
I'm okay, if you want to, I'm okay. Has anybody got any questions? Because I think that the council is pretty much, from what I'm getting, okay with what has been presented. Do we need to kind of hash this anymore, or do?
And if we have to go back, we will, but the stakeholders, the individuals that would have to pay this fee, they had no problem with it.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of input during that meeting.
And you can always come back and tweak it if we see something that may need changes, you know, in 6 months or something like that, just come back and
And the attorney did bring that up in the meeting, Mr. Meredith. She said that we can always come back and look at it if there's some changes that
Yeah.
happen in the ordinance. So we did discuss this.
Mrs. Flemming Yin had a chance to speak. Go ahead.
Gary, you were right on. Also, we have one of the drivers here tonight.
Yeah, we'll say that.
To kind of voice his opinion, because like Ms. Nat said, they were in agreement with us and wanted to continue on. To give them like we could.
Mr. Oaker, did you have something?
I'll let him speak, and I'll wait to hear what he
If you
does.
want to speak, he's in the back, sir. Would you like to say something?
Are we good presenting this the way it was? Were you in agreement with everything?
Yes, I think it's pretty good. By the way, I'm not a driver, I'm the owner of Code
Oh, I
Taxi.
meant to say that.
But a lot of the stuff is good there. I think the fees, you know, on the operating ordinance is a little high. Hopefully with the airport can get theirs squared away. But, and the police department, we definitely need to keep the fingerprints, background checks, all that. We need to have safe drivers out there on the road, and that's a big plus for us. Other than that, vehicle inspections occupies a lot of manpower for us. You know, it ties up our whole staff or mechanics, everything just to get a vehicle through inspection. So that would take a lot of expense away from us also. And that's basically it.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. And I think that ultimately it's the consumer that decides, you know, which ones they're going to use, and a lot of that stuff is taken into consideration. When you take a cab, and if it's not up to standards, if it's even dirty, not just you know, with these new companies, you know, with Uber and Lyft and stuff like that, they share that information quickly, and you can see that, and so that has a tremendous impact whether somebody's going to use that or not. So, I mean, the technology is just amazing on this stuff. So, Mr. Harris?
I was going to ask the owner of Cove Taxi once again. So you said when you're talking about the fee was a little bit, you thought it was a little bit too high. Were you talking about the $300 fee or?
Yes, I think the $300 fee was a little bit too high, but, you know, but we're also getting a 5-year operating authority out of the $300 too, which is not bad neither, because before I think we were only getting 3 years.
That's
Okay.
Yes, so the extra 2 year, the operating authority is not a deal breaker for my company.
Okay.
That would be fine with us if we stretch it out to 5 years, and then we would only have to see you guys once every 5 years instead of, you know, 6 times in 1 year and then 3-year break.
Okay. So in the end, I'm trying to lose my voice here. So in the end, though, it is a good deal for you. Then in the end, it's a good deal. Okay, that's what I need to know. Thank you, sir.
All right, so it looks like we're okay to just
okay in the
make
fee.
the necessary changes that you have here on this proposal and just bring it back for, right?
And I'm not sure which changes you wanted me to make. If
I
the
don't know.
fees
I
are
think it says
okay, the other
proposed.
part- Oh, I'm sorry. The draft has all of the things
Yeah,
that are
all
in the
this
proposal.
right there.
So bring it, go ahead and bring it
Yeah,
back.
just,
You're ready to bring it back to the
mhm,
council.
right? Council, everybody ready?
Yes, sir.
We're- Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Britt. Good job, young lady.
all right. Next item, DS 17-109, discuss city council meeting schedule, and that's me. So I had been given 3 different schedules for our Christmas holiday break, and I think I chose option number 2, which gives us the Tuesday just before the holidays off, and I thought, you know, I've had a couple of council members approach me and said that they had asked me if we were going to be off, and I had that opportunity to make that choice, so I went with that one. And it's a pretty easy schedule. We only double up, I think, a couple of times there, so other than that, we're good. I think that, is this the one we presented them, that option?
So we have the regular schedule, which is what we're, unless you change it, that's what we'll do. And then you've got the optional schedule, which is the one that you selected, Mayor.
Yeah, so I got the one that shows city council meeting. I don't think that's the one. Oh, here it is. Optional, so here's the optional. And so on the optional, you see it's got the 21st, no meeting. And then it also has the 26th, no meeting, which is the day after Christmas. I don't know if anybody wants to come and meet the day after Christmas. So basically, we will have regular council meeting and special workshop the 14th next week, no meeting, and then regular council and special workshop on the 28th, regular council meeting on the 5th, regular council meeting. And some of these, we're working on some, and I think Judy had sent me an email earlier today, and I had asked her if we had to change the times, and she said as of right now, it doesn't look like there's a lot, so we'll start at the regular time, and I think we'll be able to knock out both of them quick, so.
We should start at 3 o'clock, get early, get on the boat, we get out of
Some of them we may, but the one that I think she sent me, we're okay. So is everybody okay with that optional? Okay. So we're going to go with that.
Which option?
Huh? That optional schedule. I don't think we only got one, so.
Judy did a good job, I like to say that.
Yeah.
This is
Just remember, don't send me any more stuff, because you send me more stuff, we just keep putting it added. Yeah, don't send me no stuff till after January, so, because we already got a lot on our plate. So, I mean, unless it's something major important, I don't think, we don't have anything. All right, so we're good on that. Next is DS 17-110, planning session. Mr. Olson, city manager, review and discuss financial policy.
Mayor, we've been working for a couple of months in putting together our financial policies for the city. You will recall that when we concluded the management audit, the bulk of the recommendations made by McConnell and Jones was to establish policies that guide our financial operations. There were some recommendations that were not financial policies, and we're continuing to work on those. All of the recommendations that they made regarding financial policies are included in what you're about to see. Our intent tonight, because it's lengthy and we do need to have meaningful conversation about this, our intent tonight is to give you a summary of what we've handed out to you and then allow you to take it. We don't need to have a discussion about it tonight. We want to summarize it, let you take it, look at it for the next 2 weeks, then we'll bring it back to the work session, the next work session, and go through it section by section and ask you if you have questions on those sections. So you have some homework to do. You've got to go back and read it, and then we'll have a thorough discussion. Once we've answered all of your questions, we'll ask you to adopt it by resolution and put it into effect. So that's kind of the process that we have. I think Karen is going to walk through the PowerPoint now and give you a summary of what you're looking at, what you have in your hands with our financial policies.
All right, welcome back, Mrs. Evans.
Thank you. And this is a very brief overview. The Government Finance Officers Association best practices recommend that all cities develop financial policies which provide the basic framework for the fiscal management of the city. And as the city manager stated, we did review all of the audit recommendations from McConnell and Jones that pertain to financial statements and included those in the policies. We utilized the applicable provisions of the following organizations: the Texas Government Code, the City of Killeen Charter, the Texas Tax Code, Government Finance Officers Association, and the Governmental Accounting Standards Board to set the parameters within the policies. The policies will assist the City Council and City staff. It will help us to evaluate our current activities, evaluate proposals for future programs such as grant programs, and it will help us to maintain long-term stable and positive financial condition. We have included in the financial policies that they must be reviewed and approved by City Council annually. There are, I believe, 21 sections within the policies, and that includes the annual budget, basis of accounting and budgeting, budget administration, fiscal monitoring, auditing and financial reporting, revenues, operating expenditures, fund balance, interfund loans, that's all, interfund transfers, capital equipment and project expenditures, debt, cash management, internal controls, economic development funding, e-commerce, financial consultants, and grants. And that is my very quick overview of the financial policies.
Which, by the way, we don't need lengthy presentations to be very good presentations, and you did a good job.
Yeah, that's a good job. So now from here, we just got to take this and write notes and questions and study it, so.
Correct.
Yay, more reading.
All right.
And I will say, as a preview, I'm hoping over the next period of time, we can focus more council attention on policy. So this financial policy is the first step in doing that. We're going to follow that almost immediately. When you're finished with financial policies, our intent is to come back with a review of our protocol policies. We'll follow that with a thorough discussion about what our long-term financial budget financial strategy should be to close the gaps on the budget, and then we'll move from there to other topics. We've been putting a lot of work on those areas. I think they're going to be a tremendous help to us, and we'll just continue to march through one policy after another until we get where we need to be.
That's great. Now, that's a good way to start the year. So, all right, any questions on that? Nope. Moving on, we only got one more item. DS 17-111, discuss Rosewood Drive Extension Heritage Oak Hike and Bike Trail Row Acquisition. Mr. Olson.
I believe this is supposed to be an executive session, is it not?
Oh, yeah, I forgot. That's why we put this one on last. So this one is going to be an executive session. So we're going to have to clear the room. So if you're not part of this discussion, and this is the last item, so you can wait around just to hear us adjourn, or you can go home.